Hello, math students. Welcome back to our module on statistics and probability. And this is lesson 2, and it is called Chance Experiments Explained. Our goal for today we will learn the types of probability. The question that I want you to be thinking about is, what does equally likely mean in probability? All right, so some things to know. You need to have your mind thinking about some important vocabulary, and the important vocabulary that I am going to focus on is there is theoretical probability and there is experimental probability. Theoretical probability is a ratio of the number of desirable outcomes to the number of possible outcomes. Okay, and remember, a ratio is a comparison of two things, and so the comparison is usually shown in probability using a fraction bar. And so the ratio used in a fraction bar would be desirable outcomes for the possible outcomes. So remember, desirable outcomes compared to possible outcomes. All right, and then you have experimental probability, and experimental probability is, again, a ratio of the number of times an outcome occurs to the total number of times the event happened. So again, we're using a fraction bar, and so the number of times the outcome occurs. So when you actually had the outcome that you were seeking, so outcome seeking compared to the total number of times the event happened. So total times happening, okay? And so theoretical probability is the desirable, whereas experimental is the actual event, okay? So the way I like to keep them straight and remember the difference is theoretical, you're not actually doing an experiment, you're just talking about what could possibly happen. And then experimental is when you actually perform the experiment to see what your outcomes would be. So this is the actual real doing, this is just talking about it, okay? So during the actual experiments, you record the outcomes in a certain way. And now we're going to talk about that certain way. So remember, here's the fraction bar that I showed you up there. And then the way we see it in most exams or even in textbooks or anywhere where it's asking you to work with probability is you have P, then you have parentheses, and something inside the parentheses. It's the event that you are doing or the experiment that you're doing. So P, the probability of an event, is equal to the total amount of desired outcomes compared to the total number of trials completed. Okay, so it's very similar to the definition of theoretical. We set up our probability situation in this format. So remember that P, parentheses with the word event, it's not going to say event, it's actually going to say what it is you're looking for. So the P, parentheses with what you're looking for means that you are finding the probability of the event that you are seeking in an experiment. Total amount of desired outcomes means the number of times you observed the event occurring, and then total number of trials completed means how many times you conducted the experiment. So the definitions that I need you to be aware of is this. P of event means that you are finding the probability of the event that you are seeking. Total amount of desired outcomes means the number of times you observed the event occurring. And then the other one is total number of trials completed means how many times you conducted the experiment. So those are the definitions of how we write it. So here's an example of determining the probability. Here is an example of the probability of red marbles. So I have a bag of marbles, and inside my bag I have different colored marbles. The event that we are seeking is we're trying to figure out how many of them were red. So I pulled them out, and I pulled them out, and I pulled them out. And if you look, this 25 represents the total pulls, okay, from the bag. And then this 8 represents how many of them were red. And so our probability of getting a red marble out of the bag is 8 out of 25 pulls. So I got 8 marbles out of the 25 times that I pulled a marble out. And so this 8 is the total amount of desired outcomes, and this 25 is the total number of times of pulling the marbles out of the bag. And so that's how you find the probability of an event. Okay? So going back to our goal, today we will learn the types of probability. There are two of them that you are responsible for knowing. The difference between theoretical probability and experimental probability, okay? And then what does equally likely mean in probability? If you go back to that probability scale that we taught you in lesson 1, you should be able to answer that, okay? So a lot of the lessons that we're doing in the notes are just kind of terminology lessons, because when you actually do them, it will start to make more sense. So really trying to get you some vocabulary strength, figuring out what these words are, so that when you practice them, you know what you're covering. All right, kiddos, that's all I have for you today. Talk to you soon. Bye.